It was 1718 when a small troop of Franciscan monks came upon the headwaters of the San Antonio River. They established a mission that would become the symbol of Texas freedom. In those days, the main way of getting around was simply on foot or riding a horse. But it was the Mexican carta pulled by oxen or donkeys that did the heavy lifting. By 1847, transportation had evolved, and wagons and carriages were now being built in the north out of seasoned wood and metal. The harsh South Texas conditions couldn't stop a hardy group of explorers from establishing the first route to El Paso. So in 1850, the largest wagon train in the history of the USA set off from San Antonio. 340 loaded wagons, 4,000 animals, 450 civilians, and 175 soldiers. While regional stagecoach services started in 1847, it wasn't until 1859 when stagecoach services between San Antonio and San Diego was established. It became known as the Jackass Line because riders had to cross the Colorado Desert on the backs of mules. It's hard to understate the importance of railroads to the development of San Antonio. Journeys that took weeks now only took a few hours. Trains brought in supplies needed to build a modern city. Buildings got taller, a modern water and sewage system became possible. Ultimately, San Antonio was served by no less than 7 railroad companies, the last being completed in 1912. The transformation of San Antonio from a small town on the edge of civilization into a modern metropolitan city was ushered in by the electrification of the mule-drawn streetcar. The system would eventually grow to have 90 miles of tracks, but it was the automobile that would transform the city like no other. The first gasoline-powered vehicle was a Haynes Apperson delivered in 1901 to local banker J.D. Anderson. A year later, in 1902, 2 bicycle shop owners, L.F. Birdsong and W.F. Crothers, ordered a curved-dash Oldsmobile, immediately turning it around and selling it, becoming San Antonio's first car dealers. In 1903, 13 car owners formed the San Antonio Automobile Club. It was front-page news when they set off from Alamo Plaza on their first group run to New Braunfels. In the early days, many private landowners resented all these wealthy people zooming across their property. Once cars became more affordable and light trucks were developed, one of Henry Ford's major contributions to the world, farmers became enthusiastic supporters of road improvements because it allowed them to get their produce to market much easier and faster. It was 1910 when the world's first military flight took to the skies from Fort Sam Houston. Civilian aviation in San Antonio was soon to follow. In 1916, siblings Marjorie, Catherine, Jack, and Fred Stinson opened a flying school at an airfield that still bears their name. Stinson Field remains one of the oldest operating airports in the country. In 1933, the Great Depression consumed the nation, but San Antonio continued its unprecedented growth. To accommodate the population boom, San Antonio was the first major city in the country to replace its aging streetcars with the more flexible, cheaper gas-powered buses. In 1949, the first 3/4-mile section of freeway opened in San Antonio, just north of downtown on what later became known as IH-10. It would soon become part of a network of freeways that allows for an uninterrupted flow of traffic. While freeways comprise less than 10% of all roads in San Antonio, they carry over 70% of all the traffic, especially during rush hours. Transportation services took a great leap forward with the opening of a brand new modern terminal at the San Antonio International Airport, which had been opened in 1944. Now, with two even more modern terminals, the airport continues to bring in tourists and business people from all over the world. When Loop 410 opened in 1967, it transformed the city completely. The empty farmland on the outskirts of San Antonio was transformed into a sprawling metropolis. As the road went up, so did new malls, businesses, and suburbs. The new 50-mile loop changed the way people moved around, reducing the importance of the old city center. But the booming growth didn't stop there. In 1979, Loop 1604, twice the size of 410 at almost 100 miles, further pushed the city out away from the center of town. 105 years after the arrival of the first gasoline-powered car in San Antonio, Toyota rolled into town and full-size Tundra pickups began rolling off the production line, followed by the mid-size Tacoma 4 years later. Geographic location, excellent roads, extensive rail and air connections with suppliers was a part of the allure that led Toyota to opening the plant and bookmarking a new chapter in the legacy of San Antonio transportation. From the cart to the stagecoach, from the train to the automobile, who would have thought that a handful of Mexican pioneers with their modest carts would transform this once hard-to-reach river oasis into the 7th largest city in the country?